We have, Baruch Hashem, a wonderful crowd tonight as we welcome back a fan favorite, someone who is very much beloved in our community, not only for his brise milah. We're thrilled to have him here whenever there's a bris milah, but also as a speaker, an orator, a guide, and person of inspiration. It's a pleasure for me to be able to personally welcome on behalf of the Great Neck Synagogue the very distinguished Rabbi Paysach Krohn. Rabbi Krohn was in Israel last week. He called me Friday and said, Rabbi Palakov, tell the Steinbergs not to worry, I'm back. So Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Krohn, we're glad that you're back. I'm not sure you're glad that you're back from Israel, but we're certainly glad to have you back. We'd like to express our appreciation, of course, to the Great Neck Synagogue for sponsoring Rabbi Krohn's lecture tonight. We'd like to acknowledge, of course, the presence of our president, Donnie Aharon. Donnie, it's good to have you here with your First Lady, Marcy. Wonderful to have you here. We thank you for all that you do for the synagogue. We'd also like to acknowledge, of course, Chazan Spinner and Rabbi Slavnicki. Very special to have you here as well. Rabbi Krohn, as you know, is a very distinguished orator. And when the Steinberg family heard that it was possible to join the talk with Rabbi Krohn tonight with a Malava Malka in honor of their mother, Chava Shalmon, they literally jumped at the opportunity. So we want to take this moment to thank Orly and Alan Steinberg and their family for sponsoring our Malava Malka this evening in honor of their mother, Chava Shalmon, her miraculous recovery this year, Poo Kanainahar, and all of those things that we would normally add. And also as a tribute to the very special relationship between Chava Shalmon and Rabbi Krohn. They go back just a couple of years. How many years?
About 30.
More than 40 years. But that's just on Rabbi Krohn's side, not on Chava's side. So it's really a very special opportunity. We're grateful to the Steinberg family and thank them for sponsoring tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please give your attention to Rabbi Paysach Krohn, who will be speaking on the topic of Simcha and Elevation, a guide for inspiration on this night of Hoshaana Rabba.
It is such a great thrill for me to be here tonight. I always had a very special feeling for the Great Neck Synagogue. Many of you know that my father, Shalom, before myself, was a male, and his very, very close friend was Rabbi Freddie, Rabbi Ephraim Wolf. They learned together in Israel for many years. And many, many years ago, unfortunately, when my father passed away on Shmini Atzeres, that's when I have Yortzeit. That's when I first became a male publicly. I was actually doing it a few months before he passed away. And there were many, many people that were hesitant to take a 21-year-old kid as a male. And I couldn't blame them. But Rabbi Freddie Wolf had the confidence in me at that time, and he always referred me, and I was always forever grateful to Rabbi Wolf and to the people at the Great Neck Synagogue. Mrs. Shalman was like a mother to my children who went to Beis Yaakov. My children who went to Beis Yaakov, it's hard to believe they're grandparents today. Chaviva and Fegi and Elisheva, all of them, Baruch Hashem. And Mrs. Shalman was the focal point of Beis Yaakov. So for me to see her and to hear that you had such a wonderful recovery, Baruch Hashem, it's so nice to see you. I thank the Steinbergs for sponsoring in your honor, and I hope that we'll be able to be inspired together. I always mention Rabbi Eckstein when I come here. He was the rabbi in Little Neck for many, many wonderful years, and also always referred me as a male, and I'm always grateful for your kindness and your friendship.
You never gave me a present.
I never gave you a present. The thank you is the greatest present. I don't bribe people, even if they want them. And of course, Rabbi Polakov is everybody's favorite Rov, and just the most wonderful person. I thank him, and I thank Rabbi Lichter, who is today in Memphis. Many of you know, I called him a few weeks ago when Rabbi Polakov called me, and I said, you know, what happened to Rabbi Lichter? And he told me that he took a position out of town. And again, Al Sakar Tatoiv, I certainly wanted to mention him. There's a very interesting pasuk that is so appropriate for this final night of the 40 days from Elul to Hoshaana Rabba. We know that tonight begins Hoshaana Rabba, and this is the period of time when Hashem gives the final seal of what's going to happen to all of us in this coming year of Tavshin Pei Gimel. It is my hope that Tavshin Pei Gimel will stand for Tehei Shnas Pirsum Geula. This will be the year of the publicity and the announcement of the Geula of Mashiach finally coming. I was just in Eretz Yisrael, as Rabbi Palakov mentioned, and the spirit and the joy of mitzvahs and the whole Yontif is so incredible. And I davened in various shuls, and I can only imagine what it would be when Mashiach will be here and we'll all be together in those synagogues. I get the chills when I talk about it because the liveliness and the love of being Hashem's people is so palpable in the shuls in Eretz Yisrael. We just can't wait for the Geula to come and we can all be there together. But the pasuk in Amos tells us something very interesting. The prophet Amos says, Aryeh Sha'og, Mila Yira, if a lion roared, wouldn't you be afraid? You're walking on Cedar, or you're walking on Old Mill, or on Northern Boulevard, and all of a sudden you see a lion roaring, everybody would be afraid. And Mefarshim, the commentaries say something so interesting. They say Aryeh, which is spelled Aleph, Reish, Yud Hey, stands for Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom HaKippurim, and Hoshaana Rabba. Isn't that amazing? Right, you can write it down. Aryeh Sha'og, Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom HaKippurim, Hoshaana Rabba. These days are roaring to us. Mila Yira, shouldn't we be afraid? Shouldn't we be thinking about how we should go on with life? How we can make life better than it has been in the last 2 or 3 years, which have been very, very difficult. We're looking to have simcha. We're looking to have confidence. And how can we do this? We've gone through very, very difficult times. But I'll tell you, a number of years ago, the rabbi of the shul where I daven, a Rabbi Teitelbaum, asked a very interesting question. He said, we know that Aryeh stands for Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, Hoshaana Rabba, and a lion roars, wouldn't be afraid. He said, I took my kids to the Bronx Zoo, and they saw the lions roaring, and they were so excited. They started calling all their friends, and everybody was laughing and having a great time. So what does the pasuk mean that if a lion roars, wouldn't we be afraid? These kids, they couldn't wait to hear the lion roar even more. And he said, of course, the answer is that the lion was in a cage. And if the lion's in a cage, you got nothing to worry about. And then he said the most incredible thing. Now tomorrow, when you look at your machzor, you will see this. I never realized that I say it every single year until he pointed it out. The final prayer that we say tomorrow on Hoshaana Rabba, the final prayer, listen to the language. Yehi Ratzon. We ask Hashem, may it be your will, Shetosir, you should remove Mechitzas Habarzel, that iron bar, Hamafsekes Beinenu Ubeinecha, that separates us. In other words, Hashem, separate us from that cage. If we put God in a cage, so to speak, then we have nothing to be afraid of, but we don't feel His presence. So we're asking Hashem, remove that iron bar. Remove that barrier. We want to feel you. We want to feel what you want from us. But if we put them in a cage, it's like those kids in the Bronx Zoo. They have nothing to worry about. So if we remove Hashem from the cage, how do we become close to Him? And do we really have to be so afraid of that roar? I believe that we can roar back. And how do I know this? Because that's what Bilam said about the Jewish people. Hein om kilavi yokum. The Jewish people are like a lion. They can get up and they can roar back. So it's true. Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, Hoshaana Rabba, they're intimidating days. But we have the capacity to answer back. And that's what we're going to learn tonight. What are the strategies to deal with these 40 days And I wrote a book about it. It's called Yom Neroim with the Maggid. It's on the 40 days from Elul till Hoshaana Rabba tonight. And many, many fascinating stories. But I would like to share with you some thoughts that I think that if we inculcate them in our lives, we'll be better prepared to face Hashem. Now, I must tell you that I was very deeply moved that Hashem orchestrated something this year that should happen right before Rosh Hashanah. And that was the death of Queen Elizabeth. Now, why was that so important? I was so touched by the honor and the reverence and the esteem and all the glory that they gave to the queen, to the monarch, right before Rosh Hashanah. Why did Hashem make it happen right before Rosh Hashanah? You know, in the United States, we have no appreciation of what a king or a queen is. The day after the funeral, I was in England. The trip was planned months ago. I spoke in London and I spoke in Manchester, and thank God the trip started on Tuesday because Monday the country was closed. That's when the funeral was. But when I came there Tuesday, you know what many religious people told me? They took their children to the funeral. You know why? So that they should see King Charles and be able to make a bracha. How do you like that? The Gemara says that when you see a king, whether it's a Jewish king or a king of the nations of the world, you're supposed to make a bracha. And these children, they had never seen King Charles as a king. They knew him as Prince Charles. So now they brought him there so that they should see him, and then they should be able to make a bracha. Now I'll tell you an amazing thing. The Gemara, Rabbi Elia Lopian, who was one of the great rabbis of England and then eventually moved to Eretz Yisrael, he points out something so amazing. He said, on Rosh Hashanah, and through Aseres Yemei Tshuva, we kept on saying, HaMelech HaKadosh, HaMelech HaMishpat, God is the King of Judgment, the Holy King. And we say Malchiyos, that's part of the Shemon Esra. And the Gemara says, say Malchiyos Shetamlichuni Aleichem. Make me the king over you. Not just to say God is king of the world. He knows that. He wants to see how each of us feels. How to relate that God is the king. And I think if we think about what went on in England and we see the covet and the honor that they gave to the queen, we can understand how we have to respect Hashem himself. And I'll tell you a great story that I heard in England that happened on Friday before the funeral. Friday before the funeral, King Charles had a meeting scheduled with all the heads of all the religions, including the chief rabbi, Rabbi Ephraim Mervis. Now, the meeting was scheduled for 6 o'clock. So when the King's Court called Rabbi Mervis's office, he said he can't come because Shabbos is 6:30. When King Charles heard about it, he changed the meeting because he wanted the rabbi to be there, and he changed it to 5:30. Now listen to this. 5:30, King Charles got up to speak. At 6 o'clock, he looks at his watch and he says, Rabbi, it's time for you to leave to get home for your Sabbath. So listen to what the rabbi said. Amazing. The rabbi said, Your Honor, protocol does not allow me to leave the meeting. He said, why is that? Because protocol is if the monarch is in the room, no one is allowed to leave until he leaves. So I can't leave. The meeting is still going on. And it reminded me of a din in Shulchan Aruch that if the Sefer Torah is open, you cannot leave the shul. You can only leave the shul when the Sefer Torah is closed between the aliyahs. But if the king is there, so to speak, the Torah is open, you can't leave. Listen to what King Charles said. The Sabbath is more important. I've got a police escort for you. I want you to go. And he got him home in 7 minutes because all the streets were closed. So the king understands what Shabbos is. And the king understands what devotion to the ultimate king, the King of Kings, is all about. So if he can understand it, we should be able to understand it.
Did you do his bris?
Did I do his bris?
He had one.
He had one by a mile, it's true. It's true, Dr. Snowman. No, they didn't call me. I was busy doing the Shaman bris in Manhattan, if you remember. But I want to tell you how I believe that we can inculcate something in our lives. I'm not sure that everybody's going to agree with me because it's not easy to do what I'm about to tell you. But I'm going to tell you a great story, and I'll show you how we can all understand that Hashem is the king by something that we can undertake tonight. But I want to tell you a story. In Eretz Yisrael today, the greatest Paysach, that means the one who does all the high rulings on the most difficult questions, is a man by the name of Rabbi Zilberstein. If you could possibly see him, you have never ever seen a man with such a smile and such warmth. He lives in Bnei Brak, but he has his yeshiva in Krohn. I've met him numerous times. He is just the most wonderful, warm person. And he told this story recently. There's an area in Eretz Yisrael called Ma'ale Ephraim. It's in the West Bank. It's 52 miles north of Yerushalayim. It's a very dangerous area. It's surrounded by Arab settlements, but there's 1,400 Jews that live there. And Israel took over that place because they felt it's a very strategic location, Ma'ale Ephraim. So there's one guy there, his name is Abraham, and he is so meticulous in his prayers and his davening. He davens every word out loud, he davens slowly, and he always tells people, shut your cell phones when you're in the shul. Not put it on vibrate. That's not enough, because if you put it on vibrate, when you feel it, you're going to look to see WhatsApp, what text you got, whatever, any message, what email came in. Shut your phones. The best thing that he does is he doesn't even bring his phone into the shul. So they said to him, well, yeah, we live in an Arab areas, it's dangerous. He said, okay, fine. Let two people have their phones on. But otherwise, and this was his expression, you want to connect to God, you got to disconnect from everybody else. If you disconnect from everyone, then you can make a connection to God. But if you got your phone on, then what's going to happen? It's going to ring or vibrate, and then you're going to want to allow, I just want to see my phone, I just want to be sure that it's off, right? Better shut it off, right? You got to walk the walk and talk the talk, right? Okay. So now, that's what he always said. One night, he was coming home from a wedding in Yerushalayim, him and his wife. And they're going up Route 90, up that mountainous dark road, going up to Ma'ale Ephraim. And suddenly he turns to his wife and he says, we're being followed. She looks back, she doesn't see a car. She says, I don't see anything in the back. He says, take a closer look, their lights are off. They don't want us to know that we are being followed. She says, well, why don't you just make a left turn off the road and see if they follow? And that's what he did. And sure enough, they followed. So now he realizes this is dangerous, because if they don't have their lights on, they're probably terrorists, and they're probably after him for whatever reason. And he starts speeding, and they speed afterwards, and they speed behind him, and suddenly shots ring out, and his back window is cracked by the shots. And he says to his wife, listen, we got to get out of here. I'm going to make a quick right turn, get out of the car, roll down the hill. I'm going to get out. I'm shutting my lights. They won't see where we are, but we've got to call the police. She gets out of the car, she gets on her cell phone, she calls the police, the 911, however you dial it in Israel, and she says, we're being followed by terrorists, they're shooting at us. And the dispatcher says, where are you? She says, we're on the road going up to Ma'ale Ephraim, Route 90. And the dispatcher says, it's impossible, there's no phone service there. You can't be calling from there, this is a prank call. She says, I'm begging you, I'm telling you, that's where we are. He hangs up on her because he thought it was a prank call. So he gets on the phone and he calls the police in Ma'ale Ephraim. And he says, listen, this is Abraham, you know me. And he calls the cop, the dispatcher by the first name, because he knows the people of Ma'ale Ephraim. He says, we're on the beginning of Route 90, come and save us. The terrorists are trying to look for us and shooting at us. He says, where are you? He said, I told you, I see the sign on the bottom of Route 90. He said, it's impossible. There's no phone service there. He said, please, I'm begging you, they're shooting at us. We're terrified. He says, okay, I trust you, we'll come. And they come, a whole bunch of cars with ambulances, not ambulances, with the sirens and the cherries, and the terrorists run away. A few weeks later, they had a Suda Seidah, a thank you Suda. And at the Suda, the rabbi said, you know why that happened? God showed us a lesson. In a place where everybody was disconnected, no phone service there. The cops showed him there was no phone service. God connected to him. You know why? Because he always disconnected from everyone to be able to connect to Hashem. So Hashem said, I'll connect to you, even in the place where everybody's disconnected. And you know something, what I heard in England, and that's why I'm telling you the story? We all saw how they marched for hours, all the officers and the police and the army. They were marching alongside the coffin of Queen Elizabeth. Do you know not one of them was allowed to carry a cell phone? Of course they couldn't even put it on, that's for sure, but they were not allowed to even carry it. That's the cover, that's the honor for Malchus. Not even a chance of a phone being used. So if that's the cover you give to Queen Elizabeth, maybe from tomorrow on Hoshaana Rabba, when we walk into shul, we should shut the phone. That's the way to show that God is king. That's the one that we want to connect to. So disconnect it from everybody else for that hour or two whenever you're davening. So every morning, whether you're davening at home or whether you're davening in shul, not to put it on vibrate, shut the phone. That's a way, just like by Queen Elizabeth, those officers who gave her their final honor couldn't even carry a cell phone. We too should make sure. We want to show Hashem, we want to connect with you. We have to disconnect from society for that time. I want to tell you another thing that I think is so important. We've gone through very, very difficult times these last 2 years. It started with COVID, and then there came the terrible, terrible tragedy in Meron. 45 people killed in the most horrendous way. And then there was Surfside, if you remember. I was just at the first yard site in Surfside. They asked me to come to speak. I can't tell you how painful it was to stand in front of a crowd of 7 synagogues got together, and sitting up front are the widows of some of those people who were crushed to death in Surfside. Sitting up front were the orphans of those who lost their lives. Children, teenagers, adults who lost parents in that terrible, terrible collapse of that building. So there was COVID, and then there was Meron, then there was Surfside, and Ukrainian Jews. A number of years ago, I led a tour to Ukraine in the summer. I was in those schools in Kiev, the day camps, the boys camps, the girls camps, the yeshivas, the shuls. Imagine chas v'sholem that tomorrow everybody had to leave Great Neck and just leave with a suitcase and go to a country where you don't even understand the language. We can't even have an idea of the pain of those Jews. Or had to go to Romania, had to go to Hungary, had to go to Poland. And what are these kids and what are these parents supposed to do? Of course, Jews all over the world kicked in and supported them nobly. But you know how painful that was? And then we lost the greatest Talmud Chacham in the generation, Rabbi Kanievsky, who studied more Torah than anybody, who knew more Torah than anybody, and Nebuchadnezzar also passed away. So I remember, a number of years ago, I was asked to come to a convention. Everybody in that convention had suffered the same loss, the same painful situation. And they had a brochure that they gave out. And on the brochure, there was a fabulous cover. The cover said just these words: don't just go through it, grow through it. Don't just go through it, grow through it. That means if chas v'shalom, any of us has to go through a difficult situation, we just shouldn't just go through it. Try to grow from it. What can we gain from this experience? How can we help ourselves, and how can we eventually help others? So I want to tell you a strategy that I think that we could all do. You know, many years ago, in the 1950s, the early 1950s, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson became the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe. His father-in-law had died, and now he became the Rebbe. Now, at that time, he wasn't as popular as he was later on in the years. So if anybody came to speak to him, he had died. So a father comes in, modern fellow, and he comes in with his son, and he says, Rebbe, could you give my son a bracha? He's about to have a bar mitzvah. So the Rebbe says, why don't you sit down together? Let's talk. And in the conversation, the Rebbe asked him a question. The boy couldn't believe it, and the father surely couldn't believe that the Rebbe would ask such a question. He asked the kid, "Are you interested in sports?" And the kid said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, what's your favorite sport?" The little boy said, "Baseball." So the Rebbe said, "Do you have a team that you like to follow?" And it was 1950, the Brooklyn Dodgers were very famous. I can still tell you the lineup of the Dodgers, the 55 World Series. You know, Gilliam Reese, Snyder, Hodges, they were my heroes, right? The best thing that ever happened to me was that they moved to Los Angeles, or whatever. So the kid says, "Yeah, I love the Brooklyn Dodgers." So the Rebbe says, "Does your father ever take you to the games?" He said, "Yeah, Rebbe, he took us 2 weeks ago and it was terrible." So the Rebbe says, "What do you mean it was terrible?" So he said, "Rebbe, it was the 7th inning, the Dodgers were losing 10-0, so we left." Listen what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe asked him, "Did the players also leave?" So the boy says, "The players? They can't leave. I'm a fan. If I lose interest, I could leave." The Rebbe said, "That's exactly the lesson I'm trying to teach you." He said, "Right now you're a bar mitzvah boy. You're so excited you're putting on tefillin. You could be counted in the million." He said, sometimes adults also, they get excited about a mitzvah, but after a while, they lose interest. He said, "I want you to remember all your life, be a player, don't be a fan." What a great lesson in life. Be a player, don't be a fan. All of us go through certain periods of time. We're involved in Torah, we're involved in mitzvahs, we're involved in chesed. But then after a while, sometimes the excitement goes away. We have to be a player. And to me, who the greatest player of all was? The greatest player in Jewish history, to me, was Rabbi Akiva. He lost 24,000 students. What if you were a teacher and you had 24,000 students and God killed all of them? What would you say? "Okay, God, okay, I'm out of here. Obviously you don't like me, you don't like my Torah, I'll go do something else." No. Rabbi Akiva said, "I'm a player. We made a mistake. We didn't teach them their Eretz properly. They didn't give covet one to the other." He got 5 or 7 Talmidim according to the Medrash or the Gemara, and Umalu Kol Eretz Yisrael Torah. He built up Torah even more than he did before. We gotta be a player, and that's why this meeting, this get-together on this Hoshaana Rabba, that's what it's all about. Because we give chizuk to each other. Everybody goes through down times. But where do you get the chizuk? How do you get the strength? By coming together on a night like this on Hoshaana Rabba. And then it encourages all of us never ever to give up. No matter what happens, COVID, anything, a loss, a divorce, a financial setback, whatever. We all go through these things. But we gotta be players, we gotta hang in there. And it's only when we have unity and we care for each other deeply, that's how we can make sure that we always remain a player. Now, as we approach the final day of these 40 days, we have to understand what is the ideal Jew. So I want to show you something so brilliant that the Kovner Rav, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, once said. Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan is actually the one YU is named after him, right? Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan College, that's Yeshiva University. But he once said something so brilliant. And he said, you want to know what the ideal Jew is? Take a look in Parshas Teruma, of all places. It tells us about the Kruvim. The Kruvim were those wings that were on top of the Aron Kodesh. And the Pasuk in Shmois Chafei Pasuk Chaf tells us, Hoyu Akruvim Porsei Knofayim Lamayla. The wings spread upward. And he said that symbolizes that through Torah and Tefillah, our mindset has to always be towards God, when we're learning and when we're davening. He said, but don't forget the end of the pasuk. The end of the pasuk talks about the two little faces, the little boy and the little girl facing each other. And the pasuk says, Upneim ishalachiv. They faced each other. So that was the Bein Adam Machaverai. In other words, if a Jew just prays and learns, but he has nothing to do with the community and his friends, that's not what a Jew is all about. And if a Jew is a nice guy in his family and a nice guy in the workplace, but he doesn't learn and he doesn't daven, that's not what a Jew is about. It's the combination. It's the Porsek and the Fayim Lamaila, spreading his wings upward, having a mindset towards Hashem the King, and then Upanei Mishalach, facing one the other. That's Ben Odom Lamokim and Ben Odom Lachaverayim. So as I said before, one of the greatest, if not the greatest Talmud Chacham in our generation, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, passed away recently. Now it is unimaginable for any of us to understand how much he learned every day. I'm just going to read to you, just so that he finished Shas Bavli every year, Shas Yerushalmi. I want to just tell you his daily regimen. Then I'm going to show you something that you'll never forget. His daily regimen, every day he learned Zohar, Tilim, Tanakh, Mishnah Brura, Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Tosefta, Medrash, the writings of the Arizal, and the writings of the Ramchal. It takes almost a whole day just to say it. And he learned this every day. But I want to show you the greatest thing that I think that I ever heard from him. Listen to this. All of us know the story about how Yitzchak wanted to give Esav the bracha. Yitzchak realized he was going to die. So what happened? Yaakov came, he got the bracha, and here comes Esav. And the pasuk tells us 2 words. Now you and I have seen these words 1,000 times, but only Rab Chaim realized something. It's incredible, and I'll show you the words. Let's see if anybody can pick it up. It says that Esav brought food to his father. Vayove la'aviv. He brought the food to his father. Take a look at these words. Anybody notice something unusual about these words? Who said that? Palindrome. He's right. You see, you could read it frontwards and backwards. Vayove la'aviv. And if you want to write it down where it is, it's in Perek Chav Zayin, Pasuk Lamed Aleph. Right? So now, Vayove la'aviv. He brought the food to his father. So Rab Chaim says, why is this a palindrome? You know, like radar, race car, mom, pop, David, Yishai, all these words. You know what he said? The way you treat your parents, that's how your children are going to treat you. How do you like that? You want to know why you got nasty kids? I'll tell you. Take a look in the mirror. You know, try to remember how you treated your parents. Vayove la'aviv. Now, do you know that his son-in-law told me? It's not like I heard it from anybody else. His son-in-law, Rabbi Yitzchak Kaladetsky, told me every single morning when he finished davening, he went to visit his mother. Every morning. Sometimes she made him breakfast, sometimes not, but she always schmoozed with him for a few minutes. This Rab Chaim, every second he wanted to learn, but every morning he saw his mother. And when she died, he stopped coming. And listen to this. A few weeks later, he met his father in the street, and his father said to him in Yiddish, I love it how it sounds in Yiddish, then I'll translate. He said, the flex kumen. I also used to enjoy when you came. So he was thinking, a mother likes to schmooze with a kid, but a father, the Gadol Ador, the Stipler, or Rabbi Kanevsky, yeah, your father also wants. So maybe we have to, those of us that still have parents, and those of us who have children and grandchildren, make sure they call the grandparents every Friday. Not only Hanukkah when they want money, right? You have to have a connection to family. That's the Pneim Ishel Ochav. It begins at home. There's some people that are very nice and shul, nice in the workplace, but awful at home. Vayove la'aviv. You have to remember that. And I'll tell you a story. You know, the Chofetz Chaim says every day in Perek Yud Beis and Avos Chesed, every day you got to do a favor for another Jew. I'm not talking a husband for a wife for a husband. That you got to do if you know what's good for you. I'm talking about out of the house. So people say to me, doesn't charity begin at home? Yeah, but you're not such a big tzaddik just because you made coffee for your husband on Sunday or he bought you flowers on Friday. You know, that's just to keep the marriage going. But I'm telling you, every day we should keep a notebook of one chesed that you do for another person. I'll give you an example of Rab Chaim's chesed. You wouldn't believe this. Rab Chaim, many years ago, his son-in-law told me, when he was able to walk, in the old years he couldn't walk as well, he went to buy a lulav in one of the stores in Bnei Brak. He comes in and the proprietor sees, the Gadol Ador. He gave him a beautiful lulav. Rab Chaim looks at it, no, not this one. Second one, no. Third one, he bought. When he walks out of the store with his son-in-law, somebody comes running out of the store and he says to the son-in-law, I don't believe what I just saw. He said, what'd you just see? He said, you know how long it takes me to get a lulav? It takes me an hour and a half to pick out the right lulav. He was in the store 10 minutes and he got a lulav. He said, come with me. He said, where are we going? Just come with me. He comes to Rab Chaim's house. They walk up the stairs on Rehov Rashbam. They come to the table where Rab Chaim is learning. There are 25 lulavim on the table. He says, what is this? He says, Rab Chaim knows that everybody follows everything that he does. And if he would not have bought a lulav in that store, nobody would buy a lulav there anymore. They said, well, Rab Chaim couldn't find a lulav. I'm going to go find a lulav. So every store he goes into, he buys at least one lulav. And then when he's got 25, it takes him 3 hours to pick out the right one. Imagine that. You go into a store to buy a dress, a suit, a tie, a hat, a blouse, or whatever, and they don't have what you want, that's their problem. No, but Rab Chaim, that wasn't their problem, it was his problem. That's the Ben Adam L'Chaveirah. You want to hear something that could happen only in Eretz Yisrael? A Ben Adam L'Chaveirah. It's just unbelievable. Only in Eretz Yisrael, on an Egged bus. There's a driver there who loves his job. He's been on the Egged bus tour, on the route, for 30 years. Every person that comes onto the bus, he's got a comment. You look nice, it's wonderful, nice to see you. A Jew, an Arab, a Chassid, a Litvak, a man, a woman, he's got a nice comment for everybody. One day, he sees a woman running with 3 kids coming towards the bus. And she's out of breath, and he holds up his hand by the big window as if to say, take it easy, don't worry, I'll wait for you. Fine, she gets on the bus, she said, I'm sorry I have to make you wait. It's no problem. She says, do you mind I just put the kids in the back seat, and then I'll come up and I'll pay. So she puts the kids in the back seat, she opens up her purse, she saw she took the wrong purse. She was rushing. The wallet is in the purse she left home, now she has no money to pay. She goes up to the bus driver and she says, I'm so sorry. You saw I was rushing. I took the wrong purse. I don't have any money to pay. If you want, I'll get off the next stop with the kids. He said, nah, don't worry. It's no problem. It's paid for. She said, what do you mean it's paid for? He said, no, we have a bus gemach. Gemach is like a gemilas chesed, like a bus fund. She said, what does that mean? He said, no. Somebody took care of it. It's fine. Go back to your kids. She can't believe it. She goes back to the bus, and the guy sitting behind the bus driver says, excuse me, sir, is there really a bus gemach here? He says, yeah. The guy says, who's the bus gemach? He says, me. He said, what did that mean? He says, I live in Ramat HaSharon. In Ramat HaSharon, we have a rabbi called Rabbi Yaakov Edelstein. He always tells us we got to do a chesed every day because that's what the Chofetz Chaim says. So I was thinking, I'm not a wealthy guy. Where do I have money to do chesed for everybody? But I figured, oh, wait a second. What if somebody comes on the bus and they don't have money, or they don't have enough, or they forgot their purse? So like this, I pay for it. So that's thinking out of the box. And then he shows the card to see, yeah, he punched it 4 times. That's a bus command. Who thinks like that? But that's what chesed is all about. Not doing the conventional, going out of your way when somebody needs something. I'll tell you another way how I think we can make a connection to Hashem and feel good about ourselves. There's a pasuk that we're going to say tomorrow, and we've said it every single day in Hallel. Yehi Shem Hashem Avoirach Me'ato V'yad. God's name should be blessed from now until forever. That means every single one of us here tonight has to be a walking, talking Kiddush Shem Shemayim. Every place you go, man or woman, they know you're Jewish. It's on our face. You can't hide it. You're on a plane, you're driving on a highway, you're shopping, they know you're Jewish. So if you say something nasty to a steward or a stewardess, besides somebody's going to video it and let it go viral, in a couple of minutes like it happens. But wherever you go, when you're driving and you cut someone off, or you're shopping and you cut a line, they know you're Jewish. Yarmulke, no yarmulke, shekel, no shekel. It makes no difference, you can't hide it. And if that's the case, we have to be a walking, talking Kiddush Shem Shemayim. That's our responsibility. We don't only represent Great Neck, we represent Jewry all over the world. So I want to tell you 2 stories about what does it mean to be a walking, talking Kiddush Shem Shemayim. One of the people, Nebuch, who passed away in the past year and a half, was a wonderful, wonderful woman, Rebbetzin Sheila Feinstein. She was Moshe Feinstein's daughter-in-law and the wife of Rabbi Feinstein. She was never killed in a terrible car accident. So I went to be Menachem Ovel, the family, because I knew her. I always used to see her at various conventions. She worked in the public school system, just the most wonderful, kind, gentle person. Rabbi Moshe just adored her. He was so fond of her, his daughter-in-law. So I asked one of the daughters in Staten Island when I went to be Menachem Ovel, that's where Rabbi was sitting Shiva. I said, tell me a great story about your mother. She said, I'll tell you. She said, here in Staten Island, we have an elementary school. And one morning, the third grade Rabbi was late. He woke up late and he had to get to school on time because the kids had to daven at 8 o'clock. And he was rushing. And there was a car at the red light and he was driving too fast. He tried to slam on the brakes, but he banged into this fancy car in front of him. He felt terrible. The lady comes out. He saw in a moment that she wasn't Jewish. And he said to her, ma'am, please don't call the police. Don't call the insurance company. It's my fault. Here's my name. Here's my number. Just get an estimate from a body shop and I'll pay for it. I'm a rabbi. I don't have much money, but I'll make sure that you get paid. The entire whatever it costs to fix the car. It's my fault. I'm a teacher. I wanted the kids to pray on time at 8 o'clock. Please don't call the police. They get into a whole conversation and she says, okay. A few days later, she calls him back and she says, I went to the body shop and, this is what it's going to cost. It was a fortune. It was a very fancy car. So he says to her, look, ma'am, if you could just do me this favor, just if you don't mind. In Staten Island, I have a friend who has a body shop. His name is Mendy. Would you mind going to him and just see the work that he does? If you're satisfied with the work that he does, let him give you an estimate on your car. I think it's going to be much less than what you have here. But only if you're satisfied with the work that he does. She says, okay, I'll do that. She goes to Mendy, and she's very satisfied. He does beautiful work. She calls him up. He says he can fix it by next Thursday. You'll be able to pay him? Yeah, no problem. A few days later, Mendy calls this rabbi and says, I'm going to give back the car on Thursday. You're going to be able to pay me the full amount? He says, I'll try. And listen to this. You won't believe this. He calls the woman again. And he says, ma'am, I'd like to ask you a favor. If you can't do it, I understand, but would you be willing to pay the whole bill when you get the car? And over the next year, I'll pay you every month. On the first of the month, I'll pay you a 12th of what I owe you. And at the end of the year, you'll have your money.
It's a scam.
That's what you say. But she said yes. And every month, he paid her. At the 12th month, he called her up. And he said, it's the final payment. I'd like to come to your house. I'd like to give it to you personally. I'd like to talk to you. She says, yeah, of course. And he comes and he says, ma'am, here's the 12th payment, but I got to ask you something. Before the accident, you and I didn't even know each other. We never saw each other. Why were you so kind to me? You didn't call the police. You didn't call the insurance. You went to Mendy, the body shop, my guy. You paid the bill in advance. Why were you so kind to me? Listen to what she said. She said, I work in the public school system. Sheila Feinstein is my principal. As soon as I knew you were from her tribe, I knew I could trust you. Imagine that. That's a walking, talking Kiddush Hashem. Because if Sheila Feinstein was such a noble person, and he's a Jewish person, just like she is, that's what it's all about. Now, I'll tell you another story. You're not going to believe this, but I heard it from the guy himself. Man's name is Benjamin Ginsburg. He's a principal. He used to be in Minneapolis. Now he lives in Tom's River outside Lakewood. This story happened January 2, 2020. It's important to know what date it happened because January 1, 2020 was the Siyum HaShas. Is there anybody here who was at the Siyum HaShas in MetLife Stadium? Remember how cold it was? It was freezing, right? 95,000 people. January 1, 2020. This happened the next day. Rabbi Ginsburg told me he was in Tom's River, which is outside Lakewood, and he had to go to Borough Park because he had to give a lecture. But he was late. So he was rushing and on the Garden State Parkway, weaving in and out of traffic, and a cop stops him. What can he do? Pulls over to the side. The first words out of the cop's mouth, he says to Rabbi Ginsburg, takes a look at him, he says, did you study your page today? He says, officer, what did you just say? The guy says, I worked in MetLife Stadium, and Giant Stadium. Don't you guys study your page every day? Did you study your page? He looks at his clock, he says, officer, it's only 10:30 in the morning. I didn't get a chance to learn the page. So the officer says, well, if you promise me that you'll learn the page, I won't give you a summons. So he says, I promise. Now listen to this. The officer says to him, I want to tell you what happened yesterday at MetLife Stadium. Another fellow officer came over to me and said to me, I wish I could be Jewish. So I said to him, why do you want to be Jewish? He said, did you see this nation? 95,000 people. They're celebrating. Nobody won a lottery. They're celebrating that they study a page and they understand it. And not only that, 95,000 people are singing and dancing, and not one of them is drunk. Imagine that. And then he said the most amazing thing. He said, you know what another officer said to me? They made a big mistake yesterday. They called it Giant Stadium. It was really a stadium of giants. That's what we are. That's what we could be. When we travel and we behave in public and we act in a dignified manner, then we're a stadium of giants. That's really what it's all about. So I want to share with you two final stories. These are probably the greatest stories you will ever hear. The final story literally will change your life. But I want to tell you this first one. It's amazing. It happened in Eretz Yisrael a couple of years ago in Har Nof. There's a father and a mother. They have 7 children, and they're very tight with the kids, very close. Every year they go on vacation, but they're very organized, and they give the kids an itinerary of what they're going to do on this 3 or 4 day vacation. And they tell the kids, this is where we're going. Don't ask on the way we should go anyplace else. This is what we can afford. And no restaurants, no eateries. Mommy's going to make all the lunches and snacks, because all these eateries, especially in the summer, are very expensive. And they give them the itinerary. They're going to go up to Tveria. They're going to go jeeping. They're going to go on the Kinneret, have a boat ride. And they give each kid spending money. But don't forget, no restaurants, no eateries. They rent a car. Obviously, they don't have their own car. And they go up north. Now, if you know the geography of Eretz Yisrael, if you're going north, you're going to pass towards Tver, you're going to pass Netanya. They get to Netanya, it's gorgeous, it's on the water, they stop. Mother brings out all the lunches, they find the picnic table near the water, and they all sit down to eat. After they're finished eating, the father says, okay, everybody in the car, we got a long trip up to Tveria. 7-year-old Zevi says, Daddy, I can't get in the car yet. He said, why not? He said, you said it's a long trip, I got to go to the bathroom. I got to use the facilities. And the father says, where are we going to get a bathroom here? There's only picnic tables. He said, but Daddy, I got to have a bathroom. So he looks and he sees a block away, there's a restaurant, a Jewish place. So he tells all the kids to get in the car, and he goes with Zevi. Now he knows very well, no restaurant likes when you come in, you're going to use the facilities and you're not buying anything, but what can he do? He comes in, there's a stewardess at the door. She says, can I help you? He says, look, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I'm not here to buy anything, but my little boy has to use the facilities. Do you mind? He'll make it fast, and then we'll leave. But we have a very long trip to Tveria. She looks around the whole restaurant. She says, okay, you can go. The kid does what he has to do. He's walking out. He's in the middle of the restaurant. The father meets him. They're about to go out. And the Israeli waiter, Rafi, sees him. And he explodes. What are you guys doing here? Who gave you permission to come in here? All you religious Jews, you're all the same. You come in here, you take advantage, you're not buying anything. And he's carrying on. He says, who let you in here? Now this father is watching that waitress. She's standing on the side. She's terrified. If he says that she let him in, that waiter's going to fire her on the spot. So listen to what he says. He says, excuse me, sir, you got it all wrong. So what do you mean? He says, I'm sending my son to bring in everybody. We're all eating here. He said, I didn't know that. He said, don't worry, just at the table. How many people are you? We're 9 altogether. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. They get 2 tables, they set it. The kid goes out to the car and says his mother, Abba wants we should come into the restaurant. She said, I don't believe you. We never go to a restaurant. No, I'm telling you, he's waiting. So they all come in, they sit down, they never saw food like this, they never saw a menu like this, they never saw prices like this. And the mother says, everybody can have 1 dish and 1 drink. Finally, after they all finish eating, they all notice that outside the kitchen, there's a lot of activity. There's 6 waiters. Everyone is standing with ice cream in one hand, cake and sparklers in the other hand. And they're marching towards this table. So the father stands up and says, excuse me, we didn't order dessert, there's a mistake here. So the owner of the restaurant comes and says, sit down, I want to tell you something. He said, you don't know what happened in the kitchen when you guys sat down to eat. You see, that waitress came in, she started crying. And I said to her, why are you crying? She said, somebody just did something for me that nobody in my life ever did this. That whole family, they're spending a fortune on the food only to save my skin. He knew very well that if he said that I let him in, Rafi would fire me on the spot. I was already thinking, where am I going to get another job? So they only did it to save my skin. And she's bawling, she's crying, she can't believe it. So the owner says, for special people, we wanted to do a special thing. So this is your dessert. The kids finish the dessert, and the father says to the waiter, could you give me the bill? So he gives him the bill, and on the bill it says, if you ever come here again, it's half price. So the father says, yeah, but what about today? We just ate now. What about today? Listen to this. The owner comes over, and he says to them like this, we have a policy in this restaurant. We only charge people. We don't charge malachim. We don't charge angels. Imagine that. That's what we could be. We could be giants and we could be angels. We just have to think about it. How do we think about it? What do? We have to be players. You have to hang in there. We have to have achdus and we have to support each other. We have to have porsek nafayim lamayla. We have to concentrate making Hashem the king through Torah and Tefillah, but never forgetting the Pneim Ish Alochiv. And we all have to be walking, talking Kiddush Shem Shemayim. Now fasten your seatbelts and listen to this story. A number of years ago in Lakewood, they announced that 2 days before the holiday of Paysach, all schools are going to be closed so that the husbands could help the wives, especially the Rabbis will have off. They'll be able to help their wives 2 days before Yom Tov. It's a very busy time. Comes 2 days before Yom Tov, a 5th grade Rabbi walks into the kitchen and he says to his wife, how can I help you? She says, you really want to help? He says, I'll do anything you tell me. He says, look, Baruch Hashem, we have 6 kids. If you could take the kids on a 4-hour outing out of the house, I'll cook and bake and clean, just get them out of the house for 4 hours. And he's thinking, what in the world am I going to do with these kids for 4 hours? And then he decides that he's going to go to Newark Airport. Newark Airport is an hour from Lakewood. And they have an air train. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but many airports today that are so big, they have trains. I was just in Atlanta, they have a train that's underground. In Newark, it's overground. And it goes from terminal to terminal. You land in United, you gotta go to Delta or to American. So you go on the air train and it goes around the whole airport. Now the airport is so big and the train goes all around. So the kids not only are going from station to station, but you can see the planes taking off, the planes landing. It goes over the Jersey Turnpike, and these kids were having a ball. After 2 hours on this train, going around and round and round the whole airport, watching the planes land and take off and the highway and everything, a pilot gets on. Very spiffy looking guy with a cap. And you know these pilots are wonderful, nice guys. He sees a father with 6 kids. He says, we're all flying today. They didn't know what to say. Where are they going? So they look at the father. So the father says, actually, we're flying nowhere. He says, nowhere? He says, we have a Jewish holiday, and my wife wanted, to be able to bake and cook and clean. So she asked me if I could take the kids out. We're having a great time together on this air train. And the pilot gets very serious. He says, young man, I want to tell you something. He says, I've been a pilot for 25 years. There's not a major airport in the world that I haven't landed in. He said, 2 years ago, I got a text from my son. And he said, Dad, you're always so busy. You never came to any of my birthdays. You didn't even come to my graduation. And last week, you didn't come to your first grandson, my son's first birthday. Do me a favor. Take my number out of your contacts. And he said, 2 weeks later, I got the same text from my daughter. He said, young man, I have flown everywhere, but gone nowhere. You told me you're going nowhere, but with your kids, you're going everywhere. And that's the final lesson. The lesson is that the future of Klal Yisrael is our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. We come here tonight on Hoshaana Rabba to make a commitment to the new year. One of the major commitments that we have to make is to our families. Pnei mishalochiv, vayove la'aviv. Going everywhere. We go everywhere. Not by spending time on fancy vacations. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But don't forget the children. They need you more than anything else. They need us as role models. And tomorrow when we stand in front of Hashem and we ask to remove that mechitzas habarzel, let's feel the roar of Hashem, but let's answer back by being players, by being porsek nafayim lamayla, pnei mishalochiv, and knowing that we can go everywhere, as the people in Great Neck have been doing for years. Let's continue to do what we're doing and doing it even more under the direction of Rabbi Polakov Shlita and all the wonderful people of this Kehillah. Hashem should bless that Tavshin Pei Gimel should indeed be Tehei Shnas, the person of Geula. And next year, let's have this meeting in the Binyanei Omah together with all the shuls in Yerushalayim.
Shakoach, Rabbi Krohn. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to be able to host you tonight here in the Sukkah. I believe we have some of your books over here. If you're interested in one of Rabbi Krohn's books, to please come up. I think we might even be able to convince him to autograph.
Of course.
One of the books up
No
here.
extra charge.
For no extra charge. And Mirza Hashem, we should enter into these final days of Sukkot. Hoshaana Rabba tonight and tomorrow, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, to be able to live with the guidance and the advice that Rabbi Krohn gives us tonight. Again, we want to express our appreciation to the Steinberg family. Thank you all very much. A good kvittel, a pit katava. Mirza Hashem, we should all finish this season as strong as possible. Have a wonderful evening.
Yes. Yeah, you're a great listener, by the way. I was watching you. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the books. One of us go back and
What happened with that girlfriend?
doesn't even say it's because of the family.
Yeah, there's two different books.
Their name, oh, their name has a meaning, right?